Hey everyone, we're going to take a look today at something called compound interest. What compound interest basically refers to, or what interest basically refers to, is the fee that a lender charges a borrower for taking money. So, for example, if you use a credit card and you charge something to that credit card, you are borrowing money from another company to be able to make a purchase. And then that company is going to charge you a fee, and that fee is going to be a certain percentage. So you might have something like an annual percentage rate of like 10%. And they're basically going to charge you a fee of how much money you've borrowed. So if you've charged a really, really large amount of something, your interest rate or your interest fee is going to be a lot higher. If you've only charged a little bit, that same 10% is only going to be a smaller amount. But the interest is basically that fee that they're going to be charging you. The fee also kind of works in your favor if you think about your savings accounts. In certain banks and certain credit unions, they will offer a certain percentage of interest if you put money into a savings account with them. So this is different from a checking account, which you're probably going to use a lot more, like with your debit card. You're going to be maybe writing checks from that. You're going to be taking that money out of the ATM a lot more. But in a savings account, you kind of put the money in there and you plan to keep that money in there for an extended period of time and try not to move it around too much. Sometimes in emergency situations, maybe you need to go into your savings. But in general, you just try to put the money in the savings and leave it there until you're ready to either make a larger purchase or until you really, really need it. We're going to be taking a look at that idea of a savings account today and kind of how compound interest works when you invest money into a savings account. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a look first at $100 into a savings account that gives you 20% annual interest. Now, realistically, the 20% is probably not going to be found anywhere in a bank or credit union nowadays because it's a lot. But this is just, it really illustrates the point really well for what we're trying to do here. So we're going to take a look at two different scenarios of what it means to be compounding your interest. The first situation, we're not really compounding at all. In the first situation, you're going to get 20% of your money back at the end of the year. And that's basically the fee. If you kept your $100 in the account, didn't take any money out at all, the bank is going to say, here's 20% of that money back for you. Thanks for banking with us. I hope you keep your money with this bank as well and for the next year. So here's how this happens. We're going to take a look at the interest that gets generated at the end of that first year. So I'm going to insert an equation and then hide this so we get some more space. And what we're going to do is take the $100 that they're giving us, and we're going to multiply it by 20%. Now that 20% we do convert into a decimal, that is 0.20 is what we're going to have for that decimal. And when we multiply those things together, it should be easy to do in your head, but you're going to do 100 times 8.2, and you get $20 back. So that means that you're generating a total of $20 in interest. The bank's just giving you $20 at the end of the year just because you left your money in there and you chose that bank. So your total value at the end of the year, we're going to take the $100 that we had, add the $20 that they gave us, and we now have a total of $120 waiting for us in that bank account. So now we're going to let this run again for the next year. We're not going to touch that 120. We're just going to let it sit there, and we're going to do this again. Now we have a total of $120 in there that's in the bank account. That is now what's going to be taken 20% of. We're going to take 20% of that $120 now. So we're going to multiply this by 0.20, and we're going to get a grand total of 120 times 0.2, $24. So now we're going to be adding in an interest of $24 this time around. That means we're going to start off with the $120 we had at the beginning of the year, and we're going to add in a total of $24 to that to get a grand total of $144 waiting for us at the end of the second year. So in the beginning, you put $100 in, and just by leaving that $100 in there, at the end of 2 years, there's $144 waiting for you. You gained $44 by not even touching that 100. You just let it sit in the bank. Probably didn't even miss it. And it just generates that interest for you. So now we're going to take a look at something called compounding. So instead of waiting until the end of the year to get your 20%, a bank will sometimes split up your percentage, your interest rate, over different times in the year. So you get a little bit of your money at a time. So in situation number 2, we are going to compound this quarterly. This means 4 times in the year, they're going to give you a little bit of interest. So from like January to the end of March, at the end of March, they'll give you a little bit of your money. Then from March to June, in June, they'll give you a little bit more of your money. And then June to September. And then from October to the end of the year, they're kind of giving you a little bit of your money each time. They're not going to give you 20% each time because it's going to be 20% over the course of the year. So what we're going to have to do is take that 20% and divide it up 4 times over the course of the year, which means they're going to give you 5% at each one of those times. So they're going to give you 5% at the end of the first quarter, another 5% halfway through the year, another 5% 3/4 of the year, and then another 5% at the very end. So 20% altogether, but they're splitting it up over the course of the year. So what I want you to do is actually scroll down to the bottom of this. And in question number 1, will the 2 situations end up with the same amount of money, or will they end up with different amounts of money? In situation number 1, we had $144. Is situation number 2 also going to give us $144 at the end of this? I want you to pause this video and take a moment to write down your thoughts. So we're going to start walking our way through this and trying to figure out what the money actually is. So your first quarter, we're starting off with $100 at the very beginning of this. We're going to multiply that by only 5% this time, so 0.05. That gives us a grand total of $5 in interest. So this means we have the $100 we started with, we're adding $5 to it, and we're going to end up with a grand total of $105. And this is at the end of the first quarter, so this is about March of that first year. Then at the end of the second quarter, we're going to do the same thing again. This time we have $105 that will be multiplied by our 5%, or 0.05. And this time we're going to start getting into a few decimals in this case. So $105 multiplied by 0.05% gives us $5.25. So we're going to take that $105 that we had at the end of the first quarter, and we're going to add that $5.25 to it, which gives us a total of $110.25. So halfway point of the year, we now have a little over $110 waiting for us. And the process is going to continue. $110.25 will multiply by 0.05. It's going to give us this longer decimal, 5.5125. What we're going to do is we're going to round this down. In some of your Delta Math practice problems at the end, they ask you to round to the nearest cent, and you could round up or round down. But in general, I think the banks kind of round down in this situation. So that means that we're only going to add approximately $5.51 into this because we can't add all those different decimals in there. So we're going to take the $110.25 that we had. We're going to add our interest of $5.51. So we're going to have our 110.25 added with the $5.51. And that gives us $115.76. One more quarter to go. We're going to take this 115.76. We're going to multiply it by 5% yet again. So my calculator, I'm going to multiply the answer by 0.05. And we're going to come up with an interest of 5.78. We're going to leave off that last 8. We're just going to round that down for a second. And that means that we're going to have $115.76 added with the $5.78. And we're going to add 115.76 with the 5.78. We're going to end up with a total of $121.54 at the end of the year. So this is just the end of the very first year. If you notice, what we're going to end up with is we ended up with a total amount that is larger than what we had before. Before we had a total of $120 at the end of that first year. At the end of this year, we have a whole $1.54 more than we would have had if we just waited for the 20% at the end of the year. So by compounding that 20% over the year, we're actually doing a percentage on a little bit more. So we're doing 5% on a little bit, 5% on a little bit more, 5% on a little bit more than that. And those little cents kind of add up over the course of the year. So what I want you to do to finish off this part of your assignment is to continue to go in quarter 2. Start off with that $121.54. Find out what interest you're going to gain and continue to go to the end of the year. And then you're going to fill in kind of a summary about what happened. The amount of money at the end of year 1 in the first situation was $120. At the end of year 2, we ended up with $144. In situation 2, we ended up with $121.54. And your job is to figure out how much money is waiting for you at the end of year 2 and to kind of compare your results. You're then going to finish answering the questions at the end of this document and submitting it back to Google Classroom.